We are officially in August. So that means if you're not mock drafting at this time of the year, you're already way behind the curve in terms of getting ready for your fantasy football season. But lucky for you, today I'm going to go over 5 players we should be avoiding drafting at all costs. Wow, that was really wordy. All right, let's try that again. 5 players we're going to be avoiding this year in 2024. Roll the intro. Our first player that we should avoid drafting in 2024 is none other than the Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper, who comes in at wide receiver 28 on Underdog. The wide receiver 28 on Underdog, who's coming off of a massive 2023 season where, even though it was a monster season, only finished as wide receiver 20, sounds like it's a discount, but it's really not, and I'm going to tell you why. Cooper has 9 seasons in the NFL, but only 4 of those seasons were top 15 wide receiver finishes or better. So it seems like we don't really have much of a top 10 ceiling from him as we've seen over time. But usually some of his better seasons are kind of followed by stinkers or regressions. In 2016, Cooper finished as the wide receiver 13, and then following that up in 2017 finished as the wide receiver 36 in fantasy. In Dallas, he managed to have 2 consecutive top 15 wide receiver seasons, but that was with somebody like Dak Prescott, who was willing to throw the ball a lot. And as we saw last year, Amari Cooper had a lot of disappointing weeks, but then once Joe Flacco got under center, that's when we started to see the ceiling of Amari Cooper. But who's to say that somebody like Joe Flacco is going to play, 6, 7, 8 games like he did last year, even though he only played 5. But who's to say he plays almost half the season when Deshaun Watson is getting paid all that money and is still the starting quarterback? In 2022, Cooper was the wide receiver 10 and then finished it up last year with a wide receiver 20. So again, 2 quality seasons, but we're not really getting a wide receiver that has a ceiling to be better than his actual wide receiver 28 ADP right now. And if we remove Amari Cooper's monster Week 16 game where he had 11 receptions, 265 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns, going into that week prior, he was just a wide receiver 27. So it's not like this guy is a borderline top 15, top 20 option, and you're going to be drafting him around other guys who have the potential to actually be a top 20 option next year or this season coming up. What's tricky about analyzing Amari Cooper and how good he can be in fantasy, he mostly had nothing but disappointing games, even though finishing at wide receiver 20 overall. In 6 out of Amari Cooper's 15 games last season, he finished as the wide receiver 48 or worse. So in terms of trusting somebody that you're going to draft at wide receiver 28 to play in your lineup every single week, you're going to get stinkers and duds when it comes to Amari Cooper. That's just the way it goes. I would advise not drafting somebody like Cooper due to his volatile range of outcomes, where say it's week 9, week 10, you really need to get a win or else it's going to be really tough to make the playoffs. How could you trust somebody like Amari Cooper when he could either be the wide receiver 80-something for the week or finish as a top 10 wide receiver? It's just too much inconsistency, and that's really going to hurt you, at least in the regular season of fantasy. Moving on to the second player on this list, he sort of follows the same inconsistency patterns that we see in Amari Cooper, but this is a running back, and that would be James Conner, who's the running back 22 currently on Underdog. Similar to Amari Cooper, as I just stated, James Conner last year was a product of high volume and had a lot of inconsistent weeks along the way in 2023. But being that he finished as a top 25 running back, we all see that and think that, if he plays a full season, he should be fine. No, that's not how it works. Normally, in seasons past, we can feel pretty good about drafting somebody like James Conner because we know that they're a workhorse, but also they're a dual threat back. They are just as good at catching passes out of the backfield as they are running the ball between the tackles. But unfortunately in 2023, that was not the case, as James Conner's receiving efficiency and productivity completely fell off. And I feel that that's a sign of age, as he was 28 last year and now is going into his age 29 season. In both 2022 and 2023, James Conner just played 13 games. In 2023, he had 25 less targets and 19 less receptions. And keep in perspective that this Cardinals team last year was a team that was dying for any kind of emergence as a pass catcher. Hence why Trey McBride looks so great, and now we're overextending and reaching for him in fantasy football drafts just because of the volume that the Arizona Cardinals provided to him and the fact that they really needed somebody to just pick up the receiving work. But Conner couldn't do that. And I would not expect that, given that he's another year older, that he's somehow going to figure out how to be that really good receiving back that he was at one point. And now with rushing efficiency actually going up, but his receiving volume going down and less touchdown opportunities with guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. being added to the team, and like we just said, Trey McBride is supposedly going to break out, how is there going to be any volume or touchdowns for James Conner to operate? And not to mention, the Cardinals were desperate for any kind of running back stability last year. They even went out and traded for somebody like Michael Carter, which was a non-factor for them for the most part. But also, Amari Del Mercado was the second best running back on their depth chart, which really doesn't help anybody. Now adding Trey Benson to the Cardinals offense, a pretty solid, I'm not going to lie and say that this guy is an elite prospect, but a very good prospect in Trey Benson, mixed with the idea that he's going to get some of this opportunity that they desperately needed. I could see James Conner taking a step back, and his running back 22 price tag is just a little too rich for me at this point, so I would advise not drafting him. The next player that we're avoiding in our 2024 fantasy football drafts is none other than the Tampa Bay wide receiver Chris Godwin, who's currently the wide receiver 36 on Underdog. Sure, we could view his ADP at wide receiver 36, being that he finished a lot better than that last season, as a bargain, but if we're going to be honest about the player Chris Godwin himself and what he's shown us over his entire career, if we just take away the 2019 season where he was phenomenal, Chris Godwin is merely just a flex play, and you're drafting him right in a flex play range where there are other guys around him that have an opportunity to be better than just a flex play. If you're going to win a fantasy football league and attempt to have a really good draft that'll set you up for a championship, it's going to be because you took chances on guys where they actually have a ceiling and you're not worried about how high the floor could be, like a Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin doesn't really have the ceiling or potential now with reaching a top 20 or 25 status, even though the volume is there for him. But he's shown us year over year that with minimal touchdown receptions, with the fact that he just barely gets over 1,000 yards most seasons, it's just a safe pick. Like it's not going to win you your league because you decided to be safe and get somebody that you could rely on. You need somebody that's going to go over the top and win you weeks. I'm also under the belief that his wide receiver 28 finished last season with a really, really good coordinator in Dave Canales controlling the offense for the Bucs and now leaving for the Carolina Panthers, that everyone on the Tampa Bay roster, in terms of the offensive players, of course, is going to take a step back in terms of what they were in the previous season. So if we're going to expect Chris Godwin to be worse than wide receiver 28, then why would I take him at wide receiver 26 when he already doesn't have a ceiling to begin with? We're expecting him to take a step back, and we've never seen him be as good as he was since 2019. Chris Godwin over the last 2 seasons, just barely, like I said, gets over the 1,000-yard mark, but he's also had 6 total touchdowns in those 2 seasons. So an average of 3 touchdowns per season is not going to get it done for you in fantasy. Now, if you could get somebody like Chris Godwin in, say, like round 9, then totally, I understand going for him. But where he's going on Underdog, he's not even making it at around 6. And that is very dangerous to be taking a wide receiver with really no ceiling that early in your fantasy football drafts. Guys like Rashee Rice, Rome Odunze, or even Deontay Johnson are going after Chris Godwin. And there's no doubt about it, all 3 of those receivers have a chance to actually have a ceiling that's more than just a flex play in 2024. So I would advise staying away from Chris Godwin. But if he falls in your draft and you feel like you can get him at a value, then I'm totally okay with that. But for the most part, and where his ADP is at currently, I would advise staying away from Chris Godwin. The next player we need to stay away from on this list is Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots, who's currently the running back 20 on Underdog, which is just a little too rich for my liking. It does sound foolish for me to say do not take this player at RB20, considering he basically missed the last 6 games. He got hurt in week 13 very early in that game, so I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say he missed 6 games. But it's not that he missed games or is an injury risk. It's that his efficiency went down from last season, from 2022 to now 2023. Stevenson in 2022 was averaging 86 total yards per game, and that went down in 2023 to 71.6. And also, a big reason why Rhamondre Stevenson hit that RB10 overall finish in 2022 was because he had 88 targets and was a factor in the passing game. Fast forward to 2023, that was clearly the opposite, and his receiving efficiency went down, and that's a scary sign of even worse to come. In 2022, Stevenson was averaging 5 targets per game and 4 receptions per game, and then in 2023, that fell down to just over 4.2 targets per game and 3.1 receptions per game. And nobody really was added to the New England Patriots offense to where you could not feed him 88 targets. It's just that the efficiency and the opportunities went down for him, and that's not a good sign. He also went down in rushing efficiency, which is not a good sign either. In 2022, Stevenson was averaging 5 yards per carry, and that went down to 4 yards per carry in 2023, which is merely just above average, which is not a good sign if you're going to be taking somebody as early as running back 20. We don't want average. Sure, you can make the argument that because they have a new quarterback in Drake May, their offense should be a little better and there may be more goal line opportunities for somebody like Stevenson. But if his receiving and rushing efficiency is going down, and that this is somebody who's regressing early in his career, I am not going to take a chance that after missing the season with a high ankle sprain that he's going to come back and have that same efficiency that he had in 2022. I'm not buying it. I would much rather advise you at home taking somebody like Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, even Zach Moss or DeAndre Swift before you think about the idea of taking somebody like Rhamondre Stevenson, who in all phases of his game is losing his efficiency. And finally, the 5th and last player we should be avoiding in drafts. You might say this is a little ridiculous, like obviously I'm not taking this guy, but Khalil Shakir at wide receiver 55 is not a smart draft pick at all. And I know you're going to say, no kidding, I obviously wasn't going to take him in the first place. But being that he had 8 receiving touchdowns last season, he was somebody that caught the attention of a lot of people. And once Gabe Davis went down with an injury, he absolutely popped off in fantasy. But I'll tell you why none of that matters whatsoever. If we take away his final game of the season where he went bonkers and went over 100 receiving yards, weeks 1 to 17, Khalil Shakir was the wide receiver 67 in PPR, which is absolutely nothing considering he had 8 receiving touchdowns to go along with that. Guys like Joshua Palmer played 10 games in that stretch, and they scored 0.9 fantasy points less than somebody like Khalil Shakir. And I get it. We believe that there's going to be more opportunities for everyone in Buffalo. There's probably not going to be an opportunity for Khalil Shakir to catch 10-plus touchdowns in 2024. That would be insane. The reason why I ended up taking out his Week 18 stat line to find out he was a wide receiver 67 is because nobody's playing fantasy football in Week 18 anyway. Your championship week is usually Week 17, and then that's a wrap. So why are we even going to worry about somebody that went bonkers in a game that really doesn't even matter for us, the fantasy football community? There are just simply way better guys to take than just somebody who plays for the Buffalo Bills and is in a good scheme or a good offense. I would advise even taking guys going after him like Jacoby Myers, Brandon Cooks, Josh Downs, who I absolutely love. And rumor has it, he's the wide receiver 2 on his depth chart. And the list goes on and on. There are plenty of guys that you can get in that late round dart throw category. But Khalil Shakir is not the guy you want to be drafting. He is not him. So that pretty much wraps up my list of 5 guys we should be avoiding in fantasy. And now, of course, there are going to be situations where somebody may fall in your draft. Maybe your whole league watches my YouTube channel. I highly doubt it, but if they don't, they should probably subscribe so they do watch the channel. But maybe everyone's on the same page that somebody like Khalil Shakir or Chris Godwin isn't going to break out. But if they're there later in the draft, by all means, take them. But this is more specifically for where they're going at their ADP and why we should be avoiding them at that cost. You know, if somebody like Amari Cooper slips in your draft, take a shot on it. Why not? But to be going ahead and taking him over guys that actually have a ceiling to hit that top 20 status, I wouldn't advise doing that. I would make sure you get the guys that have that potential to win you your league first, and then we could go back for these safer options like a James Conner or Amari Cooper. But as always, if you like fantasy football content and you want to see more content like this, hit that like button. And I sound like a broken record, I say it all the time, but it helps my videos get out to more and more viewers that actually want to watch fantasy football content. Lately, we've been doing a great job of hitting that like button and spreading the video around to more and more viewers, and I'm totally appreciative of that. I am so thankful that my word is getting out there and we're smashing the like button, but we could do better than that. Come on. And if you're new to the channel and you like fantasy football content, hey, how you doing? Feel free to hit the subscribe button down below. And as always, my name is Turtle. I'm signing out, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.